Hi, everyone. My name is Liz Owen. I'm the Director of Communications at PFLAG National, and welcome to Something to Talk About Live. It's great to have you with us today. As always, I would like to bring in my friend and colleague, our Director of Learning and Inclusion, Jean Marie Navetta.
Liz Owen, you're back. I missed you.
I am relaxed and ready to talk about very stressful things.
I know, because that's exactly why we go on vacation at PFLAG, so we can come back to do more stress.
I am refreshed. Let's do it.
Excellent. Well, we have a good show, and I will see you in a little while, Liz. Thank you. Hey, everybody. My name is Jean Marie Navetta. I'm the Director of Learning and Inclusion at PFLAG National, and my pronouns are she and her. And for those of you speaking Spanish, ella. And every single week, we get together to talk about something LGBTQ related that's in the news, and we invite some friends to participate. And this week, we are going to be talking about international policy and international issues facing the LGBTQ community. This week's article is from the Associated Press. It was written by Justin Spike, and it's entitled "Thousands March in Hungary Pride to Oppose the LGBT Law." There's a lot of challenges going on there, but Hungary is certainly not isolated in this particular case. And so for this, I'm going to bring in our guests. First, I'm bringing in a person who noted last week that he has known me for more than 2 decades, which means I get to ask him for help on these shows whenever I want. And that is Diego Sanchez, PFLAG National's Director of Advocacy, Policy, and Programs. Hello, Diego.
Hello. You can ask me anything, anytime. You know that.
See? Once you threw out that we've known each other so long, I was like, oh, this is it. Now you're going to be back all the time because you have to say yes to me.
It's true.
And I think we have our other guests. I think we are having a few technical issues. Do we have Gisela? We do. We have Gisela Sene, who is from PFLAG Los Angeles, PFLAG Parent Extraordinaire. Hello, Gisela, and welcome. So
hi,
let's start today.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm so happy to be here and watch your show every week.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. I can't even believe when people say they watch our show, because I still can't believe we actually have a show. But here we are again, and you're with us finally. So I want to get into this conversation and see how we can help people understand what's going on. And so I'm actually going to start with you, Diego, just to sort of frame this up a little bit. So, how familiar with were you with what was going on in Hungary and places like Russia too? And do you think that the efforts that we're seeing internationally to roll back rights and restrict people, are these efforts looking similar to you?
Yes, and yes. I'm very familiar with what goes on around the world, partially because people around the world reach out to PFLAG. They reach out to us, and I've always had global issues in part of my work and always my personal portfolio as an immigrant. But I think that it is something that is sadly resonant in just about every country. Even those who boast inclusion and welcoming, including our own, have struggles.
And Gisela, and I'm hoping that your access is okay so you can actually hear me right now, but you are somebody of Hungarian heritage. Can you tell us a little bit about what this looks like for you? Because this is certainly not a new conversation for you.
I'm very familiar with, my father's Hungarian, my mother's Ecuadorian, and I'm married to a Spaniard. So everything that happens in those countries matters so much to me.
And when you look at what's been happening, especially in places like Hungary, have you seen the patterns of unraveling on some of the progress that people have made? I mean, what are you hearing from people when you talk about what's happening there?
You know what? There's a lot of desperation. There's a lot of anger. The Hungarian government is robbing people of their identity, of their rights, of their respect. But there's a lot of courage and perseverance, and they're going to fight back.
And are you at all surprised by what's happening? I mean, it certainly didn't just spontaneously happen. We saw a pattern towards this. Is there anything about it that's surprising, or is some of the response that you're seeing surprising? Because you mentioned people fighting back, and they recently had their Pride celebration that made global news and how many people participated in that. So are you shocked at all by what's transpiring there?
You know what? Hungary has a long patriarchal history, religious history, xenophobic history. So some of the reaction of the government is not surprising, and it appears that sometimes they're taking advantage of the population's insecurities to target the LGBTQ community. So in that sense, it's not surprising. But what is nice to see is the number of allies that have come forth. And so I have noticed that in particular, parents speaking up. I mean, thank you, PFLAG. You know, I just love that PFLAG is all about parents, friends, and families speaking up on behalf of the community. And that's what I have noticed. Every year, there are more and more parents willing to get out there and say, we love our children and they deserve to be loved and respected. So that is nice to see, but it's not unexpected to see the homophobia and transphobia in Hungary. No.
Do you think, Gisela, that the influx of parent and ally voices will change perceptions for people, that people won't just see this as an LGBT thing, but see it as a larger issue?
We can only hope. I do hope so. You know, I was telling Liz earlier that last month I participated in a panel in Hungary where there were activists from Mexico and the US who joined their voices to say, we support you, Hungary, we're here for you. And I think that for Hungarians in the LGBTQ community in Hungary, they're realizing that the world is paying attention and that we love them. And so I think that gives them hope.
I love that. And Diego, I want to talk about what these laws really mean. Because, you know, here in the US, we have seen various populations, including our own community, used to create wedges, especially during political campaigns and to motivate people. So it isn't as much about anti-LGBT as a power grab, and that's a path towards it. Do you think that that is the dynamic that we are seeing in places like Hungary too, that this is being used as a political mobilizing tool by the president, rather than specifically something aimed at targeting LGBTQ people?
Yes, I think you really nailed it. It's a matter of people in power thinking that they are picking on the weakest link, and the people who are the most discardable, the most disposable. And the error in their judgment is that we are actually people. And when you look at, you know, I always feel guilty. I am an immigrant, but I always relate things to what I've experienced in many, many countries. But seeing those LGBTQ people and their allies on the bridge in Hungary just took me to Edmund Pettus Bridge, and thinking of how much the power of people with each other, knowing that they're seen, even if it's dangerous and they could die, feeling that they either, if they're going to stay in their country, they're going to have to fight for it in a way. And the way that they fight is through their visibility, because people in other parts of the world are listening, paying attention, and holding those government entities and the people in government accountable.
And I think that's an excellent point, that it is forcing the issue and it is creating a higher level of accountability. No, this is hardly isolated. So yesterday when I was starting to prepare for today's show, I just made a list for myself of countries that I could think of off the top of my head that I knew were grappling with similar things. And I just want to share some of this, so because not everybody spent the day before this doing their homework, that necessarily watching. So we have Hungary. In Chechnya, we had, starting a few years ago, the president declared there were no gay Chechnyans, and then he opened up what has been equated to concentration camps. Spain has seen an increase in hate crimes. In France, they saw hate crimes up 36% in 1 year. Iraq, we recently had a report of a beheading of a gay man. In Brunei, they had brought back the death penalty of stoning for people in same-sex relationships. Uganda has reintroduced the famous Kill the Gays bill. It's got a different name this time around, but it does the same thing. And it's on the president's desk for signature. Panama and Philippines have had COVID-related issues when it comes to the community. And Japan, there's a lot we can say about where the Olympics is happening right now, including their treatment of people who are trans. So when we listen to lists like this, and certainly the United States is not immune from this, we could talk about our increases in hate crimes. Gisela, what do you think? What do you think this means for people internationally? LGBTQ people around the globe, because you are doing this work with so many different communities. You yourself come from an incredibly diverse background. How are people feeling? Are people scared? Are people ready to fight? I mean, has it set people back at all, in your opinion?
Well, you know what? You have to remember that a lot of these countries, a lot of the people here that I know, their families bring their culture here with them. So the LGBTQ youth and families that I work with here in Los Angeles are very much aware of what's going on in those countries, the sentiment in those countries, because they're experiencing it at home here. So they are extremely motivated to not only open hearts and minds in their families, because they know that what they do here is going to reflect on their their countries, their home countries, their country of birth, or their parents' country of birth. So they are very aware of it because they live it here still.
And Gisela, because you are so deeply involved in this work, and especially working in communities of immigrants, of people who are not white, especially in the Los Angeles area where you live, as you see this work happening, do you feel that these young activists are sort of changing the conversation? Are they forcing people to start looking at these issues both here in the U.S. and abroad? Is it part of their conversation, in your opinion?
Oh, definitely. I mean, in Mexico, for example, there's a mother and her son who are working very hard to change laws regarding trans youth, to honor their identity from a young age, so before the age of 18. There's a group of activists here in Los Angeles, Galas, the Armenian LGBTQ community, who are also working here and abroad to support activists in Armenia as well as here. So there's seeds all over Los Angeles that go out. I mean, it's like, what do you call that? The dandelion, where it goes everywhere. So anything we do here will help in other countries.
I love that analogy, the dandelion. That's so perfect, because I think it's such a smart way to think about it. And that can work both ways, that if we don't address what's happening wrong here, that gets exported too. And we have a lot of cases of that. And actually, Diego, I want to ask you about that. So we know that in a number of cases, as we look outside of the US, the anti-LGBTQ efforts that have happened have been funded from people here in the States. And they use a lot of similar language, like anti-pedophilia, which obviously these bills have nothing to do with pedophilia, but they try to frame it that way. Does it concern you that you are seeing this language happening and that there is so much support coming from the US? And what do you think? How do you think we should be addressing that? I don't think a lot of people know, which is my concern.
I agree with you, and it is a concern, but it's not new. And I mean, honestly, you have to even only look as far back as the program called PEPFAR. That is where the United States allocated a certain amount of money to go overseas in order to treat people living with HIV and AIDS. And it was started under George Bush Sr., President Bush Sr. And it was basically passed through Republicans because it addressed everyone except Americans. So it was saying, oh, those poor people over there, and it allocated money. But what it did was that funding for U.S. groups that went over was very much allegedly called faith-based. And so the things that were being taught was much along the lines of colonization that people in the United States talk about and know about occurring over decades and over centuries. So the money that's sent from the United States, I mean, honestly, you have to look also at the support that the United States, that LGBT groups and others afford to people overseas, such as you mentioned Chechnya, for example. When Russia first denied, when Vladimir Putin first denied that he was harming and killing Chechen people, LGBTQ people, it took people from our country to actually work along with Canada, frankly, through Rainbow Railroad, to be able to reach in and talk about holding them accountable. And only because we were able to elevate, fortunately, our country had established through the Obama administration, a State Department LGBT liaison of senior status who was a career person to be able to stand up and make a difference in that way. So that while people individually are funding, there are also people on high alert who are about democracy, who are about fair treatment of people. And I also have to mention that on a trip to Ukraine, when I went to Kyiv for PFLAG years ago, it was a year after the revolution. And to hear our queer friends, we're going through the city and doing these things along with Dale and Gary Bernstein. And they're talking about being in a theater and then someone threw a bomb in. So we had to go out the side. There's the theater. A bomb went off and we had to go out this other door. And it was so treated like detached, as if it was an everyday experience, because it was.
Yeah.
And so recognizing the harm that can be done when Americans intercede with danger on their minds, they need to know, and I don't know that we've been able to do that full circle, to say, when you do that, this is the outcome. We've had to go very far and very hard on PEPFAR just to make that clearer and make the path clearer for something as dramatically important globally as AIDS.
I think it's fascinating how we are able to, and I think this is out of a way to cope, normalize things that are absolutely not normal. It's not normal that you should know exactly how to get out of the building because the bomb has been thrown again. And yet this is the everyday existence for so many people. And it's becoming the everyday existence for some people here too. So let's not just point fingers. So Gisela, I'm going to guess that your answer to this question is going to be yes, which is, should U.S. activists become more engaged in foreign policy when it comes to LGBT issues? But I think what I'm looking for you to tell us is, if you needed to make the case to someone who says, we have enough problems here as an LGBTQ community, we need to focus here, what do you say to them? Because I think sometimes people are very focused on what's immediately in front of their faces, which is not another country and certainly not someplace far away. And I think you're having sound issues.
Yes, if you could please, Diego, could you help me to answer, because I couldn't hear the question.
Absolutely. I'll start and then you'll know. And so the whole point is that, do Americans need to be, or not Americans, I'm sorry, that is an inappropriate way to say it, and you didn't say it that way. Do people in the United States, regardless of wherever they're from, need to be engaged in a way that is involved on international issues? And why what case would you make as an individual to say, this is why it's important for people in the United States to be engaged and be aware of and be alarmed about global issues when we think we have things going on in our own?
John Marie, I wanted to say that, or Jean Marie, I wanted to say that when a lot of these grassroots organizations in Hungary and Mexico and other countries will issue these change.org petitions, and it really means that that's something little we can do from here. When we see those, put your name on there, sign there, because numbers matter. And if they see that, a petition goes from 10,000 to 50,000 to 100,000, that matters. So I do think it's important for us to monitor here what's going on in the world, because our lives are interconnected, our families are interconnected. But I also do want to say that when I do go to Hungary, after the first year when it seemed like we were the only family there in the march, now that we see that there are more families there marching, we want to be there we want to march with them and support them. But really, we want to support them in any way we can, knowing that they're the ones that live there.
I love the point that you made about the change.org petitions, that there is strength in numbers and these do help people make the case. Then that's such a little bit of everyday easy activism to do. It doesn't cost anything to put your name down. Diego, do you want to talk about this a little bit too, and talk about sort of your case for why we should be paying attention? Because Gisela kind of queued it up for us. We're all interconnected.
Absolutely. And I'll say this. There are ways to engage our own legislators to be involved in international issues. And the point is that there's a common courtesy so that presidents talk to presidents, executive branch people talk to executive branch people, legislators talk to legislators. So right now, while this is sitting on the Ugandan president's desk for signature, you have to know that there are both executive branch and legislative branches people in our own Congress that are reaching out to their respective peers, to their colleagues. You know, everything they do is dear colleague. How you define a colleague has to do with level of authority. So legislative elected people reach out to each other. And that is partially how we hold our other nations accountable. The other thing is a lot of things that are done are under the table. And I'll give you an example from long ago, which is when I worked on a project with Harvard University on reaching out because people in Colombia were saying that there are transgender women who were in survival sex, and it was always in certain areas of certain cities. And the law enforcement was saying, we are sick of arresting these women. We need a solution. And they called up to Harvard, and Harvard pulled together a group of people, and we did a teleconference. And with the it was with law enforcement. And we said, well, we're going to meet with you if you allow some of these women to come into your room, and we'll do the same. We brought in some people who were survival sex, people who, you know, had no way otherwise to make a living, and talked about the dangers, even in the United States, even in Boston and in Massachusetts and in other parts of the country, of why it's very dangerous. And it's not like people are trying to do something harmful or endanger themselves. And so what they ended up doing was having police protection in a particular area that and they put up fencing, and on the other side of the fencing, it was a safety zone where they could yell out if someone was doing something bad or harmful to them. And it works, and it's still working. So those kind of solutions can be done. They're not going to be I don't want to be in the Boston Globe tomorrow, but it is really important to know that some solutions are done direct consumer, you know, individual to individual, groups to groups, and that we have ways of connecting. Goodness knows that today people can connect telephonically and by visual through Zoom and otherwise in ways that we didn't see back, 15, 20 years ago.
And actually, that's something that I kind of had crossed my mind while I was beginning to prepare for today. And Gisela, can you talk about how everybody being online, has it affected the work that you're doing? Are you able to connect more easily? Do you find that these conversations are happening more frequently and that more people around the globe are connecting because of the ability to do this? Also recognizing that not everybody in not every country has access like we do.
Well, it's been really interesting because, for example, on the panel that I talked about with Budapest Pride, yes, we were able to bring in a family from Mexico, activists from Van Nuys, from Miami, and from Northern California into the conversation, meeting with activists in Hungary and in, I think, Belgium was where one of the other activists. So that was wonderful. There are people that still really need that face-to-face connection, but yes, it's been great, and it's also helped us to connect with people who maybe had transportation issues. So it's been nice. It's helped in many ways. Yes.
So I have another question for you, Gisela. For people who want to do this work, so somebody may be watching this or reads one of these articles and says, "I'm upset about this. I want to help." What kind of things would you suggest people do as they prepare to become involved in this advocacy? Is there anything specifically you would recommend that they learn? Is there anybody, any organizations that you would say in general they should be searching for? In other words, to do this with some cultural humility, because just walking into another country and telling people how we do it here is not exactly an effective or respectful way to change people.
For me?
Yes, Gisela.
You're asking. Okay. I would say that, first of all, go to Cuba. Everyone who's watching, I'm sure already loves PFLAG, is a member of PFLAG, knows about PFLAG, but I cannot emphasize enough the value and importance of PFLAG support groups as a way to empower yourself, educate yourself about the resources that PFLAG offers. When I went to any of these pride marches, whether it's in Ecuador or in Hungary, I was able to take booklets, pamphlets prepared by PFLAG to the people there. You know what? They may not have them yet. They may not have a pamphlet that says, "Mom, I'm gay. What's next?" You know, we have those and we can share them with people. A lot of people speak English, so we can share that with them. I would also, you know, take them some of our swag, you know, our PFLAG buttons. People love our PFLAG buttons. Take them, buy them. You'll help to support PFLAG, and you'll also share the love with people in other countries. When the second Pride I went to, when we rented a little car, I plastered it with PFLAG postcards, you know, because I didn't have a PFLAG banner, so I plastered it with postcards. And you know what? So that gets the word PFLAG out, because you know what? There will always be that parent for whom PFLAG will be that lifeline that they need to help their child. But also, just like you all know, we have to be very careful about not outing people. We can go to other countries and be ourselves, and we can come back to the US, no problem. But we have to be very careful about asking people how comfortable they are about being outed in our pictures, in our communications, everything. So we have to be very careful and ask them what they want.
Thank you so much. First of all, we did not pay Gisela to promote PFLAG, but she's doing an amazing job of it. But I especially appreciate what you said there. So giving people resources, in this case, PFLAG ones, but I really do appreciate what you said about understanding what safety means for people in different countries, and being aware on so many levels that post that you put on Facebook quite literally can get somebody killed if the wrong person sees it. And that very much, actually, we have documentation of where that has happened. So Diego, how do you answer the question? Because you're in the policy space, how should people be preparing? And you know, as well as the cultural inclusion piece too.
Absolutely. So first of all, I want to just mention that PFLAG National actually has a licensing agreement to the point that people speak English, many don't. And so one of the things we do with overseas non-US based organizations and just families or people, we have them for free. They just have to sign a licensing agreement that costs nothing. And what it says is, we will give you an editable version of all of our publications, the ones that you choose. And then you translate them and make them culturally competent. Translation is not enough. We've all seen screw ups with language, but make them culturally adept for your folks, because there will always be people from other countries coming to the US, and they will need that. In exchange, what we ask them for is to send us one copy so that we can produce copies for culturally people in need of that culture, so they have a culturally competent and adept publication from us. The other thing is that PFLAG National works with the State Department. Let's just say we haven't done it as much over in a prior administration, but did in the one before that. And that just means that the State Department has an international visitors leadership program. And when they send people to the US, they always want to meet with PFLAG, because they always have young, really strong young activists who want to know, how can I engage my parents? Number one, first to accept me, then to be activists with me. And then the other thing is, how do I keep them safe? Because we talk at PFLAG about parents having to come out, but it becomes dangerous in some cultures, or in the US in some zip codes. So it's not strange or different to us, but it is more predominant for them. So reach out to PFLAG. We do stay engaged. The other thing is, anytime that someone reaches us from another country, we don't automatically just write back and tell them how to reach someone in their country. We always give that name to the people we know and let the in-reach happen, not the outreach.
Yeah, and that very much is a safety issue. So I really appreciate this, because I mean, I think we've covered a lot of the bases. It is about the cultural competency. It is certainly about safety, but it also is about the ways that we can help each other. I love mentioning sort of the translations and the cultural appropriate translations going both ways, so we can actually help get that stuff out too. We are once again out of time. Our 30 minutes goes entirely too fast. But we can do this again, as Diego knows, because I've made him join me for 2 weeks in a row now. Gisela, thank you so much. I have to tell everybody I was so excited to get to work with Gisela this time because I've seen her name so many times. It's like you're the celebrity. So thank you for being here and thank you for everything you do. And Diego, as always, thank you.
Gracias por todo.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Gisela. We will see you again next week. We'll have another great conversation for you. Definitely look into some of the article that we talked about this week and then do some homework. You're going to find some very interesting things happening around you that you probably didn't realize. Anyway, we end the show the same way every single week, reminding you to run fast, laugh hard, and most of all, be kind. And please, please, please get vaccinated so we can get out of this situation. And please obey mask mandates and requests wherever you live and do the right thing, because we really want to be together again sometime soon. We'll see you again next week on Something to Talk About. If you need help before then, make sure you visit us at pflag.org. Thanks, everybody. Bye.